Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. This week, I've got 4 shows all dedicated to the housing issue in the Greater Toronto Area, and it's frankly an issue across Canada, as well as in southwestern Ontario, in numerous places in Montreal and Vancouver, and in some other cities. And I think that it's an issue that has become at the forefront of politics in the Greater Toronto Area during the most recent mayoralty campaign, in Ontario, both provincially as well as federally. And it's something that we need to pay far greater attention to. On Monday today, I've got a great interview with Stephen Valesco, who's a really fascinating young guy. What he's done is he's taking all the planning information from the City of Toronto website and made a 3D pictorial representation of the skyline and the buildings currently there, under construction, and proposed. And it's fascinating in a couple of ways. Number one, because of the amount of development that is going to be taking place. And then in addition, how much of Toronto remains undeveloped. So it really is both. And so what he shows is that along Yonge Street, along the waterfront, along King Street, in downtown Toronto area, there is a substantial amount of development proposed and under construction around major transit nodes, particularly on Yonge Street. And then he shows some other ones at the terminus of the Ontario line, at Don Mills and Eglinton, along the Golden Mile in Scarborough, around Six Points Plaza area in downtown Etobicoke, and then also Weston GO train station. And it's inspirational, frankly, as to what it's going to do for housing, for the supply of housing, for the skyline, etc. But then it's also interesting that there is a unbelievable lack of development in the balance of Toronto. There's a surprising lack of development along the Bloor-Danforth line, subway line, and I think this is something that numerous people have identified that was a mistake in the zoning that was done decades ago, when the City of Toronto allowed extra zoning, extra height, extra density along Yonge Street, but didn't along the Bloor-Danforth line. And other than in a very few circumstances, is there much density around those subway stops along Bloor-Danforth, and it remains so under the current proposals. Similarly, along the University line, which was put up the middle of the Allen Expressway for cost reasons, but because of that, it's sort of not been able to develop much density along it, other than really at the top in Vaughan, which is kind of interesting. And with all these negative comments, whether they be from people called NIMBYs or just other people generally, the vast majority of Toronto, when you see these 3D representations, remain single-family homes. And so these people that talk about we should become like Paris, with 6-story buildings everywhere, doesn't happen. And even then, people that talk about these 6-story Paris developments really probably only want it on major arterials, not everywhere. But Paris, it's everywhere, where they go 4 to 6 stories. The vast majority of Toronto stays as single-family homes, and we've got this housing affordability issue that needs to be addressed. And so on Tuesday, I talked to Kim Wright, who's a government affairs, public affairs a professional that knows Olivia Chow, has worked with the NDP since the 1990s. And we talk about the challenges that Olivia Chow is going to have as mayor, and housing, and the deficit and debts, and some of the other issues. And we really focus in on what the solution to housing is. And I think she understands that housing can't just be social housing, can't just be housing the homeless, et cetera, that are some of the focuses of the left of Olivia Chow, but need to be a general increase in housing everywhere to make it affordable for everyone. And that's a very helpful conversation about some of the challenges Olivia Chow is facing, and hopefully some of the solutions that we're looking at. On Wednesday, I've got a really interesting guy from the United States, Francis Saleh, talking about remote work. And his contention is that downtowns have and will and must change. And office landlords and employers need to change. And he's saying that this dream of going back to where we were, where everyone's going to go back 5 days a week, in the office. It's just not going to happen. That we found that people, number one, really like working from home, and number two, are just as productive, if not more productive, when they work from home. And he talks about how inefficient and unproductive the long commute is, that it's a wasted time, and that people often, when they work from home, spent that commute time working, and that one of the reasons why productivity went up is just people worked more on work. And what's wrong with that from an employer standpoint? And that while we do need to collaborate and communicate, sometimes we don't need to do it 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And he effectively calls employers that want people to go back full time without real justification for it, dinosaurs effectively. It's kind of shocking. And I think it's something we need to listen to, but its implications for downtowns, for office conversions to residential, for zoning regulations that need to change to allow that, are kind of interesting. And then it all comes together with Ron Butler from Butler Mortgages on Thursday, where we talk about the affordability crisis and how difficult it's going to be and is to solve it. We talk about provincial government deregulation, where they're trying to speed up the process of approval of housing. We talk about development fees and how they really are a tax on those people that are most vulnerable in our society, newcomers to Canada, young people, renters that want to convert to home ownership, et cetera, and that it's completely unfair, that it's used as a slush fund by some municipalities, that the development fees are so differential, 5 times higher in Mississauga than they are in Burlington, 47% increase in Toronto last year, that really what they are is a way of municipalities keeping property taxes low or lower than they should be on people that are currently voting, rather than doing what they should do, which is the right thing for the municipality in whole. And we talk about how interest rate increases, how current mortgage rate rules, how the combination of all that with high housing prices, lack of supply, has led to a situation where Ron Butler, a guy that I think knows the housing business real well, wonders if there's any solution at all. So it's a week that I'm focusing on housing. And if you're interested in the housing affordability issue, I've got 4 different and very interesting takes on this problem. And then to round it out for the week, I've got Colleen McKay of Transcending Minds talking about neuro-linguistic programming, limiting beliefs, deep dives to figure out what your goals are, what your dreams are, and changing your life, transcending your mind to inspire you for the weekend. So it's a great week coming up. I encourage you to watch or listen to some of my shows. I can be listened to every night at 6 o'clock on 960 a.m. I can be streamed every evening at 6 o'clock on www.saga960am.ca. I post all the videos of my interviews on social media, on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and on YouTube. And I post all of the podcasts of my interviews on social media, on Audible, Apple, SoundCloud, and Speakeasy. And check me out. I got a week on housing, and then an inspirational chat on Friday about transcending your mind, transforming your life. It's a great week. That's my intro. In 2 minutes, we're going to have Stephen Valesco talking about future Model TO.